never thought I'd stand at my mother's front door, holding a birthday cake, only to be told I wasn't welcome at my own father's birthday. Something inside me went silent, like someone had turned off all the sound in my head. It wasn't that I was unfamiliar with my mother's coldness. It was that I hadn't expected her to say it out loud, in front of my family, with a smug little smile like she'd just won some quiet, bitter game of chess. If you've ever had to choose between your dignity and your family, leave a comment, hit like, share this story, and follow the channel so you don't miss what comes next. My name is Lily Matthews. I'm 30 years old, a financial planner living in Portland, Oregon. As the youngest in the family, I was always the one quietly organizing things, patching over conflicts, smoothing rough edges. I'd spent over 2 years saving up to plan a special trip for my dad's 65th birthday, a man who taught me how to change light bulbs, read history, and stay calm when the world turned its back. And now, my mom, Celeste, looked me dead in the eye, colder than a February morning here, and said, "We've discussed this. You shouldn't attend your father's birthday party." There was no anger in her voice, no hesitation, just a command, delivered as casually as if I were a delivery person who rang the wrong bell. I looked at her, her hair pinned neatly back, cardigan buttoned to the top. Behind her in the living room, I heard my sister Hannah and brother-in-law Brandon laughing. They were taping up banners, unpacking balloons, arranging flowers in crystal vases I knew by heart. They'd belonged to my grandmother. No one turned to look at me. I set the cake down on the small table near the entry, dark chocolate, white frosting, "Happy Birthday, Dad," written carefully by hand the night before. For a second, I thought I saw my reflection in the glossy glaze. Small, distorted, disappearing. "Aren't you coming in?" my mother asked, voice still feather light. "Why am I not allowed to be here?" I asked. I tried to keep my tone level, not sharp, but my throat burned like smoke. She shrugged. "Your Italy idea stressed everyone out. We just wanted a simple celebration at home with family and friends. You kept pushing that trip. It was unrealistic." "I spent 2 years preparing it," I said. "That trip was Dad's birthday wish. He told me." She laughed softly. "He was just being polite. You really think everyone likes traveling? Men his age just want peace and quiet, not fancy itineraries or extravagant gestures." I gripped the strap of my purse tighter. I remembered Dad poring over maps of Tuscany, practicing the names of little hillside towns. He wasn't faking, but apparently that didn't matter to Mom or anyone siding with her. I turned to Hannah, who had just come out of the kitchen with a tray of dishes. She looked past me like I was no one. "You knew about this?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just set the tray down and said quietly, "Mom thought it'd be less complicated." "I'm the complication?" I laughed, short and dry. "Because I wanted Dad to have the birthday he dreamed of, I'm the problem?" "Lily, let's not blow this out of proportion," my mom interrupted. "Everything's already arranged. We don't want more disruption." "I guess I'm not part of we." No one responded. I nodded, picked up the cake box, and stepped outside. The winter sun was already dipping low, light cutting through the frosted glass and onto my hand. I didn't feel angry. Not the way I expected. The clearest feeling was hollow, like I'd just been erased from the family photo. I drove home in silence. The radio played a wordless jazz tune, the saxophone winding like a soft reminder. Something gentle still existed, even when unspoken. I parked outside my apartment and opened the email to cancel the Sienna villa I'd booked, a 4-bedroom farmhouse overlooking vineyards. I'd even planned to FaceTime the owners to apologize, but my hand hovered. I called Dad. 3 rings, then voicemail. I left a message. "Dad, I hope you have a really great birthday, even without me. There's a lot I haven't said, but I think maybe it's time for you to see for yourself. Happy birthday." I hung up, then transferred $48,200 from my Italy account into personal savings. When the screen flashed "Transaction completed," I stared at the number like it was a dead memory. I thought that was the end. I didn't realize it was just the beginning. I got back to my apartment around 6 p.m., that dusky spring chill Portland wears like a habit. Still cold, but the air smelled faintly damp, like soil waking up. I hung my coat, slipped off my shoes, and went straight to the kitchen. Not hungry, not thirsty, just cold in the center of my chest. Images looped in my mind, Mom's folded arms, her tight lips, Hannah looking away, and Dad? Nowhere. That house didn't feel like mine anymore. I pulled a soda bottle from the fridge and drank straight from it, the cold running sharp down my throat to burn off something nameless and raw. As a kid, I was always the one in the background. Not because I was shy, but because I learned early that this family didn't like voices that asked for too much. Hannah was the storyteller. People listened when she spoke. I got praise when I stepped aside. One year, my birthday fell during Hannah's exam week. Dad still baked the cake and sang, but Mom just left a card under my pillow. No candles, no greetings. I didn't feel sad. I felt guilty for distracting her. Hannah was the class president, cheer squad captain, best smile in the yearbook. Me? I held the camera. I liked seeing others happy. But the older I got, the heavier it felt, being the background. I remember one night when I was 15, Dad took me out to the yard to teach me how to reverse park. "Your mom said I should let Hannah go first," he said, hands on the wheel. "But I think you'll pick it up quicker." He didn't say much, but the way he nodded when I braked just right, how he handed me cookies afterward, made me feel seen. That was enough. I chose finance partly out of passion, partly to prove to my mom that I could be successful like she bragged about Hannah. Now, a freelance interior designer. But after graduation, I realized no success would ever be enough for her to be proud of me. The last time I had Dad to myself was last fall. Farmer's market stroll, warm apple pie at Laurel House Park. He told me about my grandfather, a Sardinian carpenter who never returned to his homeland. If he were still alive, Dad said, I'd take him to see the vineyards in Montepulciano. That sentence is what started my plan. Every lunch I packed, instead of buying out, was a saved dollar. I canceled my gym membership, skipped 2 beach trips with friends. I didn't tell anyone but Dad, until I thought the others might be happy to join. I was wrong. I sat on the living room floor, opened my laptop, and scrolled back to the villa photos in Siena. Warm lights spilling from wooden windows, a stone terrace, rows of cypress trees. I'd pictured us dining under grapevines, Hannah telling stories, Dad toasting, Mom smiling, and me just sitting there quietly, watching them, feeling full. At the time, I didn't realize the part that hurt the most wasn't being left out of the birthday party. It was that no one seemed to think anything was wrong with it. I opened my phone and searched for Dad's name. His last message was from 3 days ago. "Did you book the tickets yet? I'm practicing how to say dove posso comprare vino." I smiled for a second, then felt my throat tighten. I didn't know if he'd still want to go if he found out everyone else wasn't coming. If he knew Mom had told me, your dad's birthday doesn't need you. If he knew I had just canceled everything just to keep myself from being trampled one more time. I looked out the window. Portland's sky was pale and gray, a few drops of rain beginning to tap against the balcony railing. I turned on the warm lamp in the living room, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and sat still. Should I tell Dad? Or stay silent, let him enjoy that cozy birthday illusion that had been so carefully staged? I hadn't decided. But I knew this. No one should walk through what I just did without at least asking a question. And maybe the answer was in the voice of the one person who hadn't shown up yet. I had to hear it directly, not filtered through anyone else, not through Mom, not through Hannah. I would call Dad. I called him at 8 a.m. the next morning while the fog still clung to the pine branches outside the balcony. He picked up after 2 rings. "Lily?" His voice was calm, steady, the same tone he used every Saturday morning. "Is something wrong?" Just wanted to check in, I said, keeping my tone light. Do you have a few minutes? I heard a wooden chair creak. Just made some coffee. What's going on? The Italy trip. I hesitated. Are you still excited about it? He chuckled. Excited? I've been practicing how to say Dove il bagno and I still sound like I'm from Nebraska. Of course I'm excited. Why do you ask? I pressed my lips together. It's nothing, just it seems like the rest of the family doesn't think it's necessary. The silence on his end lasted longer than I expected. I pictured him sitting at the small kitchen table by the window, holding his ceramic mug, the light from the backyard casting across the bridge of his nose. Did someone say something to you? He asked, slowly. I swallowed. It's more like I feel like I'm making everyone uncomfortable. Lily, he said, I'm incredibly grateful you thought of this trip. Not every dad has a daughter who's willing to give up time, money, and energy just to make her father happy. I've been looking forward to it every single day. A breath left my chest, soft and shaky. Then I'll keep going with it. You don't have to carry this on your own, he added. If you need help, I'm here. I know, I said, eyes stinging. I just wanted to make sure you actually wanted to go, not just to be polite. No one studies Italian for 2 months just to be polite, he said with a hint of sarcasm. Thanks for calling. I'll start packing my suitcase today. When the call ended, I stared at the dimming phone screen. Relief settled in, but in a way that felt cold, like something was still moving beneath the surface that I hadn't uncovered yet. I turned back to my desk and reopened the folder labeled Dad 65 Italy. Inside were dozens of files, detailed itineraries, photos of the villa in Arezzo, a list of wine tours in Umbria, and contracts from the travel company I'd put a deposit with. I'd researched, compared, and double-checked every part myself. I had never gone to this much effort for anyone other than me. Every confirmation email, every Tuscany map pinned to my wall was a quiet message to the father I believed deserved a gift that matched who he'd been to me. I used to picture the whole family enjoying that trip together, not perfect, but unforgettable. I'd imagined dinners on the terrace, wine being poured, Hannah laughing louder than the soft background music. I even planned to gift Mama a set of Italian silk handkerchiefs embroidered with her name, as some kind of bridge, if not a spoken apology. But maybe they'd never seen me as part of the shared picture. I was the one behind the camera, the one making plans, footing bills, not the one who got a seat at the table. I opened an old message from Hannah. Hope you understand, this is for Dad. No one wants drama. No one asked if I was okay. No one messaged after I walked out of Mom's house yesterday. I was the daughter who planned the whole trip, and the only one uninvited to the celebration. I shut my laptop and walked to the window. Outside looked the same, wet sidewalks, my neighbor's bike leaning under the cherry tree. I caught my reflection in the glass. Hair tied messily, faded turtleneck sweater, tired eyes. I looked like someone who hadn't rested in weeks. I opened the door and stepped onto the balcony. The scent of wet wood drifted up, laced with the soft sharpness of rain. One question repeated in my head. If Dad truly wanted to go, what exactly were the others so afraid of? I had tried not to think about it, but one truth wouldn't stay buried. Mom never liked how close I was to Dad. She didn't say it, but her eyes always hardened when he mentioned me with pride. Once, when I came home for a visit and Dad bragged about my promotion, Mom just nodded and turned to ask Hannah about her new design project. I remember her scrubbing the dining table like my success had left a stain on the oak. I used to tell myself, she's just bad at showing emotion, but even personality has its limits. I walked back in, grabbed a blank sheet of paper, and wrote in black ink, if I disappeared from this family, would anyone notice? I wasn't sure, but one person was still waiting for me on the shores of Italy, under red clay rooftops and Mediterranean light. And if I wanted to keep that connection, I had to ask something out loud. Why is Mom so afraid of this trip? Her message came Sunday evening while I was chopping onions for a simple dinner. Soba noodles with vegetables and ginger soy sauce. You free this Thursday? Come home for dinner. Dad will be golfing with Uncle Alan, and I want to talk before you finalize the Italy plans. The way she wrote it, I felt like an employee heading into an exit interview. I reread it 3 times, not because I was confused, but to figure out what part actually mattered. I replied simply, I'll be there by 6. That Thursday afternoon was overcast, wind slashing hard across the Burnside Bridge. I stopped at a nearby cafe and bought a box of chocolate chip cookies, still clinging to the old habit of never showing up empty-handed. The path to their house still had the purple asters we'd planted back in middle school. Now they looked sparse, brittle, and small, like memories left untended for years. Hannah's beige SUV was parked out front. I walked up the steps and knocked, even though I had the key in my pocket. Mom opened the door. White blouse, gray slacks, softly curled hair. She looked exactly like she did 20 years ago. Even her expression was the same. Calm, in a cold, measured way. "Come in," she said, like she was directing a stranger. I set the cookie box on the kitchen island. No one said thank you. There wasn't a trace of food smell in the air. Definitely not a real dinner. The living room glowed with soft lighting, curtains drawn. Hannah was already on the couch. Brandon, her husband, sat beside her, scrolling his phone. Mom took the chair opposite, legs crossed, hands folded neatly on her knee. "Good," she began. "We're all here." I glanced around, feeling like I'd stumbled into a staff meeting for a committee I never signed up for. "We want to clarify the Italy situation," Mom said. "After considering everything, your sister, Brandon, and I all believe the trip isn't reasonable." "Not reasonable for who?" I asked. Brandon chimed in, voice steady and vague as always. "It's a great idea in theory, but realistically, everyone's got work, kids, expenses. No one has the time or budget." "I never asked anyone to come," I said, keeping my tone as even as I could. "It's a gift for Dad, not a group vacation." "And Dad's too polite," Hannah cut in. "You know how he is. He wouldn't say no, even if he wanted to." I turned to Mom. "He told me he's excited. So who's making decisions for him?" "We're protecting him," she replied, eyes still unmoving. "At his age, a long overseas trip is more burden than joy." "He still hikes every month," I said. "He just signed up for a 10K run with his friends, the one you always complain about because he trains too much." "Lily, it's not just about stamina," she said. "It's also about his emotional well-being. He needs stability, familiar faces, people who matter here." I gave a soft laugh, and I guess I don't count as someone who matters. "Don't twist my words," she said coolly. Hannah glanced at Brandon, then back at me. "Here's an idea, Lily. Mom and I are planning a birthday party at the house. We'll invite his coworkers, some old friends, family. It'll be warm and lively. He'll love it." "I already booked the villa, flights, wine tours," I said, non-refundable. "But that's not the point. The point is whether Dad wants to go." "Then let him decide," Mom said, "once we present all the options." "But he hasn't heard all the options," I pushed back. "He's only heard your side." Silence. Hannah adjusted her sleeve. Brandon reached for a glass of water. Mom leaned on the armrest and spoke, again, softer. "Lily, you always do things your way, expecting the world to fall in line. You never ask if people are comfortable with your plans." "No, I only asked Dad," I said, not breaking eye contact. "And he said yes." Mom stared at me for a few seconds, no anger in her eyes, just something that looked like fatigue mixed with caution. Like she'd been waiting for this confrontation for a long time, and now that it was here, she just wanted it over with. "Bottom line," she said, "we're hosting the birthday party at home on the 18th. If you want to attend, you're welcome. As for the Italy trip, I suggest you cancel it." I stood up. "No, I won't cancel unless Dad calls and tells me he doesn't want to go." No one replied. I looked at the 3 faces in the room, hoping for one flicker of doubt, one glance of support. Nothing. I walked to the door. Just as my hand touched the wooden knob, Mom called after me. Just because you think something is good doesn't mean it's right. I didn't turn around, and it doesn't mean it's wrong. I drove home in a soft drizzle. When I pulled up in front of my apartment, my hands stayed on the steering wheel longer than usual. I knew I'd have to call Dad and lay it all out soon. But first, I needed to be sure of one thing. What had they been telling him this whole time? I called Dad Monday morning during his usual walk around the park. 4 rings, then silence. I tried again. Still no answer. This time, I didn't feel worry. I felt suspicion. 3 weeks ago, if I called at this hour, he'd pick up while panting and say, "I'm counting steps," then brag about his step count like a kid waving a perfect test score. I texted, "Call me when you can, Dad. Got an update on the trip." 3 hours passed. Nothing. Not even a read receipt. I stood at the kitchen window, tapping my fingertip against a glass of cold water. Part of me wanted to believe he was busy, but another part, the instinctual part, whispered, "Something is being blocked." I called the landline. The operator said the number was busy. I didn't try again. I let a day pass. Then a second, then a third. No message. No email. By Wednesday night, I got a text from Mom. "We've decided to proceed with the birthday party on the 18th as planned. Everything is going very well. We hope you'll respect the family's choice." Not a single word about Dad. I read that message over and over in the warm light of the kitchen lamp. I pictured Mom in front of her mirror, fixing her blouse collar, choosing her words like she chose her perfume, strong enough to mask anything unpleasant. I put my phone down, pulled out the chair, and sat. The feeling of powerlessness didn't crash over me, it crept up like rising water around my ankles, slow and cold. I reopened every document related to the trip. The villa invoice, airline tickets, confirmation from the travel company. I read each line like it was evidence in a case where I was the plaintiff. And then I did 3 things. First, I canceled the villa booking. Second, I called the travel agency and asked them to cancel the tours and flights. Third, I transferred the entire $48,200 into my personal savings account. No one knew I did it. No announcements, no declarations. I just didn't want to keep chasing something that others were quietly tearing down. The next morning, I left Dad a voicemail. "Dad, I'm not sure what's going on, but I just canceled the entire Italy trip. Not because I wanted to, but because it feels like you're being held back. Not by your legs, but by silence. If I'm wrong, just call and tell me. But if I'm right, I'm still here. And I don't blame you." I set the phone down on the table. Outside, the rain started to fall. That night, I opened a bottle of Italian wine I had saved for dinner in Montepulciano. The taste was sharp, not quite smooth yet, but still more bearable than the way family can look right through you, like you were never there. Jennifer, my best friend from college, texted me, "Are you free tonight? I've got pizza and a bottle of Cabernet." Replied, "The door's unlocked." An hour later, she walked in with a paper bag clinking against her leg. "You look like you got dumped, fired, and lost concert tickets all in one day," she said, when she saw me sitting cross-legged in the living room, wine glass in hand. "I just pulled myself out of an entire family," I said, my voice as dry as my throat. "And I'm guessing they still have no idea they're wrong?" I didn't answer. Jennifer set down the bag, pulled me to my feet, and dragged me out to the balcony. The breeze was cool, the air damp, city noise humming beneath everything. She leaned her shoulder into mine. "You ever think," she said, "maybe that trip, you should have kept it for yourself?" I turned to her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you've spent 2 years planning it out of love, then why not make it a gift for the person who gave all that love?" I paused. The idea sounded foreign, almost selfish, but dangerously reasonable. "I wouldn't book it exactly the same," I said quietly. "Of course not. Who travels solo and still books a 4-bedroom villa?" Jennifer laughed. I laughed, too, for the first time in days. It didn't last long, but it was enough to crack the shell wrapped around my chest all week. I didn't know yet if I'd really dare turn that dream into a solo trip, But as night settled, I found myself reopening the Tuscany map. I searched for places where company wasn't required to feel fulfilled. And then my phone buzzed. A message from the landline at my parents' house. Just 3 words. Call Dad back. My fingers hovered over the screen, my heartbeat skipping a half beat. Some explanations can't be held off any longer. I called the moment I read it. My hand holding the phone trembled, not from fear, but because something had cracked open in the silence of the past week. Dad picked up after a few rings. It's me. Just 2 words. His voice didn't carry any dramatic tone, but it wasn't steady either. Something hollow had replaced the calm. It's me, I replied. Are you okay? I'm at Uncle Frank's. Came out here for a few days of quiet. I sat on the edge of the bed. Did something happen? A long breath. Not a sigh, just the sound of a knot slowly loosening. Last week, I found the brochure you printed about that cooking class in Siena. It was in your mom's drawer. I said nothing. My heart didn't race, but every part of me listened. I asked her about it, and she changed the subject. Then I checked her phone. Checked the emails. Things didn't add up. Finally, I called the bank. His voice dropped. You didn't cancel the trip because you wanted to, did you? I closed my eyes. No, Dad. He said nothing more, but I could hear him piecing it all together, slowly and carefully, like he always did with old clocks or busted engines. I called a few times, I said more softly. You didn't answer. I thought maybe you changed your mind. I never got any of them. His voice cracked. I thought you didn't want to come to my birthday. I thought you were pulling away, and I felt devastated. I bit my lip. I never chose that. There was a sound of a chair scraping. Maybe he sat down, or maybe he just needed something to hold on to. Hannah told me, he went on. She overheard your mom on the phone with what sounded like the invitation printer. Your mom told them not to send one to you, said you declined to attend. Hannah thought it was strange and told me. A chill climbed up my spine. Each word peeled back a layer I had never been allowed to touch. I was cut from the guest list, I said, not as a question. Not because I disagreed, but because Mom created a narrative. Dad exhaled heavily. Yes. I leaned against the wall. The late afternoon light had shifted into a dusky blue, casting long streaks on the curtains. Part of me felt sad. The other part felt bone-tired. Tired of having to prove I wasn't wrong, when no one had ever openly accused me. If you've ever been silenced for speaking truth, or blamed just for setting boundaries, leave a comment. Share this story if someone out there needs to hear it. Do you blame me? He asked after a long pause. No, I said honestly. I blame Mom. And I blame myself for letting it go on this long without asking the right questions. I didn't realize things had gone this far, he said. I thought she just didn't like the plan. I didn't think she wanted you out of it entirely. Why? I asked, even though part of me already suspected the answer. Maybe because there's something between you and Dad that Mom could never touch. He hesitated. And that made her feel left out. I remembered all those quiet mornings in the kitchen, me asking Dad about a recipe while Mom stood at the sink, silently washing dishes. Childhood photos. Dad carrying me through the forest in Olympic Peninsula. Mom never in the frame. Her little jabs. Seems like only you two speak the same language. What do we do next? I asked. Meet, he said. You, me, and if possible, Hannah. Then we decide about Italy and talk to Mom. I don't want to speak to her unless you're there, I admitted. And I don't want to speak to her unless you are. We arranged to meet at the cabin by Lake Detroit, where our family used to spend the holidays, a place with fewer phone rings and no kitchen calendars. We would sit facing each other with the lake light between us, and no one could delete messages or block the way to the table. The call ended. I set the phone down. No music, no more wine, no texting Jennifer. I sat quietly, staring at the wall. not to hide, but to brace myself. Some cracks only reveal themselves when hit by direct light. The cabin up north hadn't changed much since the last time I'd been there, nearly 8 years ago, when we camped out during Thanksgiving. The door still creaked when opened, the faded blue-striped rug still sat under the pine table in the living room, and Dad's favorite armchair still faced the big window looking out over the lake. This time, it was just the three of us. I arrived Friday afternoon. Dad was already there. Hannah came half an hour later with a paper bag of bread and a bottle of pomegranate juice, which she placed straight into the fridge without saying a word. Nobody offered to cook. We just made tea, split a few cookies from an old tin, and sat down at the dining table, where the pendant light made a small, warm circle in the wood-heavy kitchen. Dad began. "We need to talk. We all know why." Hannah glanced at me, then looked down at her tea, hands wrapped tightly around the cup as if holding onto the warmth. I didn't blame her, at least not directly. She never pushed me out, but she also never stopped it from happening. "I want to know," I said, keeping my voice steady, "what Mom told everyone. About the trip. About me. About me not coming to Dad's birthday." Hannah exhaled. She said, "You wanted to pull away. That you didn't want to blend in with the family vibe. That you didn't like others being involved in your plans." I never said that. I met her eyes. Not once. "I know," she nodded softly. But when Mom repeated it enough times, I started to believe it. Or at least stopped questioning it. I looked at Dad. "She lied to you too." He nodded, his fingers turning his now loose wedding ring. "I thought your silence meant you wanted to skip the party. I felt abandoned, but in truth, you never got the chance to speak." A longer silence fell over the room. I didn't know when truth became something that had to take the long way around just to reach the people who needed to hear it, and I wondered, if I hadn't come all the way out here, would Dad have ever found out? "So now what?" Hannah asked. "It's all out now, but what do we do with it?" Didn't answer right away. That question wasn't mine alone. "We meet with your mom," Dad said, firmly, "not to blame her, but to confront. No one gets to rewrite reality and expect others to live by it." I nodded. "I agree, but I don't want her spin or her dodging. If she can't tell the truth, I won't keep pretending." Dad turned to Hannah. "Are you coming?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes. If not to defend anyone, then at least to hear it firsthand." We scheduled to meet Mom Sunday afternoon at my parents' house. She didn't protest, didn't even ask why, just replied with 3 words. "Fine. I'll wait." I arrived 10 minutes early. Dad parked by the curb, still in his old but pressed gray coat. Hannah sat in the back seat, calm with a wary edge. Mom opened the door just as we stepped onto the porch. She wore a long brown dress and a crewneck sweater. Her face was unreadable, not angry, not worried, not pretending to be happy either. We sat in the living room, the same place that had hosted countless family gatherings, where I always seemed to be the one doing dishes after. "Enough," she said, not confrontational, not welcoming either. Dad looked at her. "I know what you said about Lily wasn't true. You lied. To me, to Hannah, to the whole family." "Why?" I asked. "Why make up a version of me that isn't real?" Mom crossed her arms. "Because I was tired of watching him put you first. For years, I've felt like an outsider in my own home. And your solution was to erase me?" Her eyes reddened. "I just wanted him to notice me, not always see Lily in every decision." "Dad never abandoned you," I said slowly, "but you chose to push me away." "You don't understand," she said. "You have all of him, his attention, his pride, his conversations, the kind I never had. And your way of evening the score was making him believe I bailed on his birthday?" Dad interrupted. "No one in this house is the enemy, but if we keep pretending nothing's broken, these wounds won't close." Mom lowered her head. She had no response. "Do you need help?" Hannah asked. Her voice wasn't cold, nor was it soft, just clear. Mom looked at the three of us. Not a word. Then she stood slowly and walked upstairs. No one followed. We left the house just as a light drizzle began to fall. I didn't feel relieved, but I no longer felt alone either. The truth doesn't heal instantly, but at least it doesn't keep you living in the dark. And Dad was the first to say it out loud. We still have Italy, he said, opening the car door, if you want to go. I looked up at the gray sky, then nodded. But this trip would no longer look like the original plan. 3 weeks after the conversation at my parents' house, Dad and I boarded a flight from Portland to Rome. No send-off, no well wishes from relatives, not a single card from Mom. Hannah sent a short text. Hope you and Dad have a meaningful trip. Don't forget pictures. I didn't reply. Not out of anger, but because what still needed to be said between us had to wait until the distance softened what wasn't necessary. Dad wore the pale blue linen shirt I had given him last Christmas. He didn't say much once we sat down, but when the plane took off, his fingers brushed against mine, a quiet confirmation. We were really going. The Tuscany greeted us with soft light and a breeze drifting through the olive groves. Not loud, not showy, just a calm that made you breathe a little slower. I picked a small apartment in a converted stone tower in the town of Cortona. 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a balcony overlooking the Vineyard Valley, no luxury tub or room service. But every morning, church bells chimed, and our host, Elvira, spoke English with a velvet, soft Italian accent. Dad loved it right away. Didn't expect you to find a place with a real Italian espresso machine, he said, watching the slow pour. I could live here for months without a single complaint. I smiled. Let's call this our summer headquarters. We started with simple things, browsing farmers markets, having breakfast in the town square, sipping coffee at small, white-painted iron tables. Dad tried speaking Italian to everyone, even though he clearly remembered only about 7 words and 3 phrases, but everyone smiled and answered him with that famously patient Italian warmth. On day 3, we visited the village of Santa Fiora, where Dad's grandfather once lived. The bus had only 2 routes a day, and the road curved endlessly, but when we stepped off the last stone stair into the village, I felt something slow down inside me. Not time, just my guard. Part of me had worried the trip would disappoint if it didn't hit right, but when I saw Dad stop beneath an old Via della Fonte sign, eyes lighting up like he was rereading the first chapter of a long-forgotten book, I understood. We found the church where his grandfather had been baptized, then the little library that kept the old birth records. An older woman with silver hair pinned up pointed at a faded, handwritten line, Giorgio Vasari, born 1923. Dad rested his hand on the glass, silent, but I saw him blink faster than usual. That evening we had dinner with a local family, distant cousins from the Vasari side I had found through a Facebook group months earlier. They welcomed us with homemade wine, fresh peachy pasta, and an old album with a black and white photo of 2 boys standing in front of an olive tree. That's Grandpa and his youngest brother, Dad whispered, fingertips barely grazing the photo, like he might blur it. Another evening, we joined a cooking class in Siena, not the one I originally booked, but a smaller one with just 4 people. We learned how to make ravioli from scratch, stuff it with ricotta, and fold each piece with our palms. Dad fumbled with the dough, but his smile was bright. From now on, I'll teach this class back home, he announced, making everyone laugh. On the ride back, we didn't speak much, but in the quiet I heard the easy exhales, not from fatigue, but from finally being ourselves, unadjusted, unproven, and I realized this wasn't the trip I'd planned. It was something new, smaller, quieter, but more real. No banners, no invites, no everyone. Just 2 people and a memory being rewritten by hand. On our last night in Cortona, Dad and I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine each. The crescent moon hung low, light spilling like silver glaze across the red rooftops. Thank you, he said, still looking ahead. Not for the plans, for not giving up. I looked at him. You didn't give up on me either. He turned and clinked his glass lightly against mine. We're starting again. Doesn't have to be big, just has to be honest. I nodded, but inside I knew. Part of my life would always be marked by two chapters. Before and after this trip. And once we returned to Portland, someone else would have to face that shift too. We landed back at Portland Airport on a cloudy morning. It wasn't cold, but the wind made me shiver as I dragged my suitcase through the parking lot. Dad didn't say much on the way home, just tuned the radio to a jazz station and tapped along softly to the saxophone. The days in Italy were still vivid in my mind like raw film. Gray cobblestone, the swirl of Italian accents and soft laughter, the scent of olive oil on my fingertips while making pasta, and Dad's eyes, at ease, unguarded. When we got to his house, he parked and paused. You want to come in? I looked at the front door. Same paint. Nothing changed. At least not on the outside. No, I want to rest at the apartment a bit, but thank you. He nodded. Didn't push. Before I stepped out, he added, "My mom called this afternoon. She wants to see you. Just you." I wasn't surprised. My heart just beat a bit slower. Away. She said, she started seeing someone, a therapist. No promises, just wants to speak directly. No one in the middle. I nodded. Didn't say yes. Didn't say no. 3 days later, I showed up at her house. The door was already open. She waited in the living room alone. The lighting was soft, the curtains half drawn. A lemon tea sat on the table in front of the chair I used to claim when I lived here. Everything in its place. Tidy, a bit too controlled. I sat down. Didn't touch the tea. How are you? She asked, tone steady. I'm fine. She nodded, eyes lowered to her lap. Your dad told me a little about the trip. Then I guess you know what happened, I said. Not the way you wanted. She pressed her lips together. Yes, and maybe... That's actually right. I didn't respond. Mom was never the kind of person to say the word wrong. But she didn't dodge it. Since you were little, she began, I've always felt like an outsider between you and your dad. No matter how hard I tried, I felt left out. I never tried to push you out, I said. But I also couldn't stop being myself just to make you feel enough. She nodded. I understand that more now. But when I was caught in the cycle, I kept thinking that if I wasn't at the center, I was losing control. And I hated that feeling. Control wasn't what your daughter wanted from you, I replied. All I ever needed was for you not to destroy the things I spent years trying to build. After a pause, she said, I was wrong. The lying, the stories, cutting you out of the party. There's no excuse. I stayed quiet, not because I expected an apology, but because I needed to hear her name, what no one else in the family had ever dared say. My therapist says, if I want to heal, I have to stop controlling everything. I have to give people space to exist without orbiting around me. I gave a soft laugh. That idea must have made you feel suffocated. She laughed, too. Tired, but honest. But I'll try. We sat there for a long time. No one looked at the clock. I didn't touch the tea. But I didn't leave either. Dad's 66th birthday came 2 weeks later. No big party. Just a quiet dinner at a small Italian restaurant opened 10 years ago by a couple from Florence. A round table for 6, me, Dad, Hannah, Brandon, Mom, and Rebecca, Tyler's ex-wife who had stayed in touch after the divorce. No one brought a card, no one made a toast. But after dessert, Dad raised his glass. His voice was warm and steady, like the rhythmic hammering in the shop class he used to teach. Thank you all. Not just for being here, but for sitting down, for listening, and for being willing to rewrite the stories we once thought were true. I looked around the table. Mom didn't react, but she didn't roll her eyes, didn't interrupt. She lifted her glass and nodded slightly. As we left the restaurant, Dad and I looked up at the sign swinging between two pots of bougainvillea. He tilted his head. Still prefer Italy? I smiled. They're completely different. But both are necessary chapters, he said. On the drive home, I got a text from Hannah. Next week, Mom and I are going to our first family therapy session. There's room for you, if you're open. I didn't reply right away, but I didn't delete the message either. Because part of me knew some fractures can't be sealed with silence. They only heal when brought into the light. I sat on the back steps, watching the late afternoon sun stretch across the freshly mowed lawn. The scent of mint from the pot Dad gave me in early spring still lingered, light and clean. Inside, I heard Hannah laughing in the kitchen, guiding Mom through the barley salad recipe I once shared. Mom didn't interfere like she used to. She was quieter now, but not with that tense silence I grew up with. It was more like a deliberate pause, as if she was learning to listen with both ears and a heart no longer terrified of losing control. I haven't called this a reconciliation, but I no longer call it distance either. After our third therapy session, Mom spoke up just before we left. Would you want to grab coffee with me sometime? Not to talk things out, just to have coffee? I nodded. We walked to the cafe on Main Avenue. It used to be a little bookstore when I was in high school, where I wrote my first scholarship essay in the corner booth. Now it's an open space, filled with light through big windows. The wind chime on the door still sounds the same. She ordered a flat white, I ordered an Americano. Neither of us added sugar. What do you remember most about our home, she asked, as we sat down. I was a little surprised, but I answered truthfully. The quietest moments, I said. When I'd wake up early in summer, step into the backyard and see Dad reading the paper, you cutting flowers, and no one talking. Just the snip of scissors and the turn of pages. She smiled, a smile that wasn't forced. And here I thought you hated silence, she said. I shrugged. I only hated the silence I was forced to endure, but the real peaceful ones. I keep those close. Rebecca hosted a small gathering at her new house by the river. I was invited, not as an afterthought, but directly. She called me herself and said, would you like to come? It'll be a light evening, just 10 people or so. I'm making that grilled shrimp you like. I went and didn't feel like a spectator in my own life. Tyler wasn't there. They hadn't spoken since the divorce hearing. But what comforted me was that no one brought him up, not out of anger, but because they'd stopped letting the past interrupt the present. At the end of the night, Dad joined me in the yard. He watched the kids tossing a ball by the water and said, you're doing better, aren't you? I nodded. Better, in the sense that I don't need anyone else to confirm it. He touched my shoulder gently. I didn't say another word. But I knew he understood. Summer passed like a breeze off the lake. No climax, no grand finale. I still live in my small apartment in the Pearl District, still teach creative writing on Monday nights, still get coffee at the same cafe every Sunday morning. But there's something different in the way I breathe. Lighter. Not because everything is perfect, but because I no longer shrink to fit someone else's expectations. Mom and I didn't become best friends, but sometimes she sends photos of her garden with notes like, this one might make a good story. I still keep a safe distance, not out of fear, but because I know now love needs space, too. I don't know where you're listening from, in the car, before bed, or on a day when you needed a story to remind you to keep going. And let me know where you're tuning in from. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this, ones that feel real, don't forget to follow the channel. The next one might be exactly what you need. Lily's story is a gentle but powerful reminder that healing doesn't come from a dramatic turning point, but from quiet, deliberate choices made every day. In a family shaped by pain, she didn't try to change others, she changed how she showed up. By setting boundaries, holding onto her values, and letting the past stay in the past, Lily didn't just reclaim herself, she created a space where love could be rebuilt through truth and respect